It was a Friday evening in June when James Miller made the decision that would destroy his life. He was sitting on a curb outside a corner store in Houston, holding a lottery ticket worth $1.2 billion. His four best friends sat next to him. They had no idea one of them had just become a billionaire. They were laughing, joking about what they'd do when they finally won big. "We split everything, right?" one of them said. "Always," James replied. He was lying, because James had already decided he wasn't going to share a single dollar, not with the people who'd been his brothers for 5 years, not with the friends who'd pulled him out of poverty more times than he could count. Instead, James was going to fake his own death and disappear with every penny. He thought he'd gotten away with the perfect crime. He had no idea karma was already writing his ending. And what karma did to him 7 years later was so brutal, so perfectly devastating, that his story became a warning told across the entire country. Before we start, help me prove something. My mother said I'd never reach 100 subscribers. Subscribe to The Tales Teller and show her these stories matter. Now let's continue. 6 months earlier, December 2015, James Miller was 22 years old and so broke he'd been eating ramen noodles for dinner every night for 3 weeks. He worked as a repair technician in Houston's Fifth Ward, one of the poorest neighborhoods in Texas. $8 an hour, 40 hours a week. After rent, utilities, and his bus pass, James had maybe $50 left each month. It wasn't enough to live on. It was barely enough to survive. But James wasn't alone in his struggle. There was Robert, 24, construction worker, 3 jobs, still couldn't afford to move his sick mother out of their moldy apartment. There was David, 23, also construction, sending half his paycheck to his little sister so she could stay in school. There was Michael, 25, construction foreman, dreamed of starting his own company but couldn't save enough for the license fees. And there was Christopher, 26, a roofer. His wife needed surgery that insurance refused to cover. They needed $50,000. They had $300. These 5 men became brothers not by blood, but by necessity. They met working odd jobs around Fifth Ward. They bonded over shared poverty, shared dreams, shared desperation. And every Friday after work, they had a ritual. They'd meet at Mrs. Garcia's food stand on the corner of Lyons Avenue. Mrs. Garcia was 60 years old and had been selling tamales from that corner for 30 years. She knew these boys. She'd watched some of them grow up. When they were short on cash, she'd give them food anyway. "Pay me next week," she'd say with a wave of her hand. After eating, the 5 friends would walk next door to the corner store, and they'd gamble. Not at casinos. They couldn't afford that. They'd buy lottery tickets, scratchers, Powerball, Mega Millions. $5 each, sometimes 10 if they'd had a good week. They'd pool the money together and buy tickets as a group. Then they'd sit on the curb and scratch them off, dreaming out loud about what they'd do when they won. "When I win," Robert would say, "I'm buying my mama a real house with a yard and a safe neighborhood." "When I win," David would add, "I'm sending my sister to a better school, somewhere where she won't get bullied for being smart." Michael always had the same dream. "I'm starting my own construction company, hiring all y'all. We work for ourselves, no more working for bosses who treat us like we're disposable." And Christopher's dream broke your heart every time he said it. "I'm getting my wife's surgery, the one that'll save her life." And James would smile and say the words that would haunt him later. "When I win, I'm taking care of all of us. We're brothers. We split everything. Always." They believed him, because that's what they'd always done, split everything. When David's car broke down and he couldn't afford repairs, they all pitched in, $50 each. Problem solved. When Michael's father died and he couldn't afford a funeral, they pooled every dollar they had and gave him $600. It wasn't much, but it was everything they had. When James got evicted because he was short on rent, Robert let him sleep on his couch for 2 months, didn't ask for a dime. That's what brothers do. They show up, they sacrifice, they trust each other with everything. That trust would become James's weapon.
It was Friday, January 15, 2016. The 5 friends met at Mrs. Garcia's stand like always. But something was different tonight. The Mega Millions jackpot had been rolling over for weeks. It was now at $1.2 billion, the biggest lottery jackpot in American history. Everyone in the country was talking about it. Gas station clerks, news anchors, broke 20-somethings sitting on curbs in Houston's Fifth Ward. The energy was electric. "This is it," Robert said, his eyes wide with hope. "I can feel it. This is our week." "You say that every week," David laughed. "Nah, man, this is different. My grandma came to me at a dream last night. She told me to play her birthday numbers." They all laughed, but there was something in the air, a nervous energy, a what if. $1.2 billion. That kind of money didn't just change your life. It erased your old life completely and gave you a new one. "All right," Michael said, pulling out his wallet. "I got $10. "Same," Christopher added. "I got 15, David said, throwing in some crumpled bills. 10 for me, Robert confirmed. They all looked at James. James opened his wallet. He had $13 inside. $13 until next Friday's paycheck. If he put in 10, he'd have $3 for the entire week. $3 for food, for emergencies, for life. "I got 10, James said, pulling out a $10 bill. He pocketed the remaining $3. The others didn't notice. Why would they? They trusted him. Michael collected the money. $55 total. "Same deal as always?" Michael asked. "We split any winnings 5 ways, equal shares, no matter what." "Always," they all said in unison, including James. "Always." Liar. They walked to the corner store together. Michael went inside to buy the tickets while the others waited with Mrs. Garcia, who was packing up her stand for the night. "You boys gonna win tonight," Mrs. Garcia said with a knowing smile. "I can feel it in my bones." "Mrs. Garcia, you say that every week," Christopher laughed. "This time I mean it," she insisted. "God's gonna bless one of you. I just know it." James smiled at her. "From your mouth to God's ears, Mrs. Garcia." If only he'd known those words would come back to destroy him. Michael came out of the store holding a stack of lottery tickets. $55 worth, he announced. 27 tickets total. He started handing them out. 5 tickets to each person, 2 left over for the group pot. Then they did what they always did. They filled out one special ticket together using their pooled money. Robert's grandmother's birthday. 7, 13, 24, 31, 42. Powerball, 8. They each signed the back of that ticket, all 5 names. Proof of their agreement. Proof that they were in this together. Michael held on to the group tickets. "I'll keep these safe." They all went home that night with their individual quick pick tickets, promising to check them after the 10 p.m. drawing. James walked back to his studio apartment. He laid his 5 tickets on the kitchen table. And then a thought crept into his mind, a terrible, poisonous thought. What if I bought one more ticket, just for myself, with Robert's grandmother's numbers? It was just a thought, but thoughts become actions, and actions become catastrophes. James looked at his $3 in his wallet, the $3 he'd held back from the group pool. He grabbed his jacket. He walked back to the corner store, and he bought one more ticket. He filled in the numbers by hand. 7, 13, 24, 31, 42. Powerball, 8. The exact same numbers they'd used for the group ticket. But this ticket only had one name on it. James's. He went home and waited. At 10 p.m., James sat in front of his TV with 6 lottery tickets spread across his coffee table. 5 from the group pool, 1 he'd bought in secret. The numbers were drawn slowly, one by one. 7, 13, 24, 31, 42, Powerball,
8. Robert's grandmother's numbers. James's heart stopped. He checked his 5 group tickets first. None of them matched. Then he looked at the secret ticket, the one only he knew about. Every single number matched. James had just won $1.2 billion, and nobody knew it. Not his friends, not his family, not a single soul on earth. For 3 hours, James sat in his apartment staring at that ticket. His hands shook, his mind raced. Here's the thing about moral crossroads. You always know when you're standing at one. James knew exactly what he should do. Call his friends, tell them about the ticket, split the money like Beta agreed. That would give him $240 million before taxes, maybe $120 million after. Still more money than he'd ever dreamed of, still enough to change his life forever. But James's brain did the math that turns good men into monsters. If he kept it all, he'd have $1.2 billion, maybe $600 million after taxes, 5 times more. All he had to do was lie. All he had to do was betray the only people who'd ever been there for him. At 1 a.m., James made his decision, and everything that came after, the fake death, the lonely mansion, the cancer, the funeral with 6 attendees, all of it started with that single choice. Saturday morning, James called in sick to work. Then he started planning the biggest lie of his life. First problem, the group ticket. Michael had the group ticket with all 5 signatures, the ticket with Robert's grandmother's numbers. But that ticket wouldn't win because James's secret ticket, the one only he had, those were the winning numbers. The group ticket was worthless. James just had to make sure Michael checked it and confirmed they'd lost. Around noon, James called Michael, trying to sound casual. "Yo, you checked the tickets yet?" "Nah, been working all morning," Michael said. "Why, you win something?" "Nah," James lied smoothly. "I checked mine, all losers. Was hoping maybe the group ticket hit." "I'll check tonight. We'll probably meet up at Mrs. Garcia's anyway." "Cool, see you then." James hung up, his heart pounding. It was working. The lie was working. That night, the 5 friends met at Mrs. Garcia's as usual. Michael pulled out his phone and checked the group ticket numbers against the winning numbers. "We didn't win," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "None of them matched." "Damn," Robert sighed. "I really thought Grandma's numbers would hit this time." "They will someday, bro," David said, clapping Robert on the shoulder. "What about you, James?" Christopher asked. "You check yours?" "Yeah," James lied, looking his best friend straight in the eye. "All losers." They sat there, 5 broke friends, 5 brothers, not knowing that one of them was sitting on $1.2 billion. "Next time," Michael said. "Next time," they all agreed. James smiled and nodded, but inside he was already planning his exit. Over the next 2 weeks, James researched everything. How to claim lottery winnings anonymously. In Texas, you can't. Your name becomes public record. How to disappear without a trace. How to fake your own death. That last search should have stopped him, should have made him realize he'd crossed a line. But James was too far gone. He'd convinced himself he deserved this, that his friends would waste the money anyway, that he was smarter, better, more deserving. The poverty had twisted something in him, made him believe that survival meant stepping on anyone who stood between him and escape, even the people who loved him. On Saturday, January 30th, James sent a group text. "Going hiking at Brazos Bend State Park. Need to clear my head. See y'all Monday." None of them thought anything of it. James went hiking sometimes when he needed to think. But James didn't go to Brazos Bend. He drove 2 hours south to Galveston Beach. He arrived at dawn when the beach was empty. He parked his car in the lot, left his wallet on the front seat with his ID clearly visible. He left his shoes and shirt at the water's edge like he'd gone for a swim and never come back. Then James walked away from his old life. He took a bus to San Antonio, another bus to Phoenix, a flight to Las Vegas using a fake ID he'd bought online for $300. In Las Vegas, James hired a lawyer who specialized in claiming lottery winnings anonymously. The lawyer set up a trust, claimed the ticket on James's behalf, and just like that, William Miller, broke repair technician from Fifth Ward, ceased to exist. William Parker, billionaire, was born.
Back in Houston, James's friends were panicking. When James didn't show up to work Monday, they called him, no answer. When he didn't respond to texts by Tuesday, they knew something was wrong. Robert drove to James's apartment. The landlord let him in. Most of James's stuff was gone. Clothes, documents, the photo of his parents he kept by his bed. "Call the police," Robert said, his voice shaking. "Something's wrong." They filed a missing person report Tuesday afternoon. Thursday morning, Galveston police called with news. They'd found James's car at the beach, his wallet, his phone, his clothes. No body, but all the signs of a drowning. The Coast Guard searched for 3 days. They found nothing. On Monday, February 8th, James Miller was declared a presumed drowning victim. His friends fell apart. Robert couldn't stop crying. "He was my brother, man, my brother." David blamed himself. "I should have gone with him. He seems stressed lately. I should have known." Michael organized the memorial service because that's what Michael did. He took care of things. They pooled their money, again, to pay for it. Mrs. Garcia catered it for free, making all of James's favorite foods through her tears. Over 100 people came, friends, neighbors, people from the Fifth Ward who'd known James, people he'd helped when he had nothing to give. Everyone crying over a man who wasn't dead, a man who was sitting in a Las Vegas penthouse at that exact moment, watching news coverage of his own funeral on TV, eating takeout from a restaurant that charged $60 for a salad. James felt something when he watched Robert break down crying during the eulogy. Guilt, maybe, regret. But then he looked at his bank account, $1.2 billion. The guilt faded. He poured himself expensive whiskey and convinced himself he'd made the right choice. They would have wasted it. They didn't understand money. They would have stayed in Fifth Ward and helped everyone until the money ran out. But James was smart. He'd invest it, grow it, build an empire. He deserved this. He owed them nothing. That's what James told himself as he fell asleep in his California king bed and his penthouse in a city where nobody knew his real name. And James Miller, the loyal friend, the brother, the good guy, died that night. Not from drowning, from greed. 7 years passed. James, now William Parker, lived the life he'd always dreamed of. Mansion in the Hollywood Hills, 15 bedrooms he never used, infinity pool overlooking Los Angeles. Cars that cost more than houses, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, a Bugatti he drove twice. Watches that cost more than his friends' annual salaries. He dated models who didn't know his real name, actresses who left when the money stopped flowing. He invested in businesses, started companies, made more money. By 2023, William Parker was worth nearly $2 billion. He'd escaped poverty. He'd become someone. He'd won. Except he was miserable. The mansion felt empty. The cars sat unused in the garage. The watches gathered dust. James started drinking, heavily. Then came the cocaine, the parties with strangers who trashed his house, the mornings waking up in hotel rooms not remembering how he got there. He was surrounded by hundreds of people and completely alone, because every friendship was transactional. Every relationship was about his money. Nobody knew the real him. Nobody knew James Miller, because James Miller was dead. Sometimes, late at night, when the alcohol made him honest, James would look up his old friends on social media. Robert still worked construction, still lived in Fifth Ward, still struggled. David had gotten married, had a daughter, worked 2 jobs to keep her fed. Michael's dream of owning a construction company never happened. He was still a foreman making barely enough to survive. And Christopher's wife had started a GoFundMe for her surgery.
They needed $50,000. They'd raised $3,000 in 2 years. The surgery would save her life, but without it, doctors gave her 5 years, maybe less. James could have paid for it with pocket change, wouldn't have even noticed it was gone. But if he helped, they'd find him, and finding him meant losing everything. So James did nothing. He scrolled past their struggles and went back to his empty, expensive existence. Then, everything changed. March 2023, James woke up with a headache that wouldn't stop. He took painkillers. They didn't work. The headaches got worse, then came nosebleeds, then dizziness. James went to a private doctor in Beverly Hills. Tests were run, scans were done. A week later, the doctor called him in. "Mr. Parker, I can tell from his face that this was bad. I'm afraid I have difficult news." James's stomach dropped. "You have glioblastoma. It's an aggressive form of brain cancer." The world stopped moving. "How bad is it?" "Stage 4, very advanced. I'm sorry, but the prognosis is poor." "What does that mean? How long?" "With aggressive treatment, chemotherapy, radiation, possibly surgery, you might have 18 months, maybe 2 years. Without treatment," the doctor trailed off. "How long without treatment?" 6 months, possibly less." "Can it be cured?" The doctor's silence was answer enough. James left the office in a daze. He went home to his mansion in the Hollywood Hills, walked through his empty rooms, looked at his expensive furniture, his art collection, his cars parked in the garage, and he realized something that broke him. He was going to die alone. He had $2 billion and not one person who actually cared whether he lived or died. The people he'd betrayed, his brothers, they would have been there. They would have sought with him through chemo, hold his hand when he was scared, made stupid jokes to help him forget for just a minute that he was dying. But he threw them away. For what? For this? A mansion with no one in it? Cars he never drove? Money he couldn't spend? James started treatment the next week. Chemotherapy was brutal. He lost his hair, lost weight, spent days vomiting, too weak to leave his bed. The model stopped calling, the business partners stopped investing. The friends who weren't really friends disappeared. Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy someone to hold your hand in a chemo ward. It can't buy someone who cares if you're scared. It can't buy the thing James needed most, forgiveness. 6 months into treatment, the doctor delivered more bad news. "The cancer isn't responding. It's spreading faster than we anticipated. I think you need to start preparing yourself. Get your affairs in order." "How long?" 3 to 4 months. "I'm very sorry." James went home and got drunk. And then he made a decision. He was going to Houston. He was going to find his friends. He didn't know what he expected. Forgiveness, understanding, a miracle. Maybe he just wanted to apologize before he died. Maybe he wanted to see if James Miller could still be saved. October 2023. James flew to Houston. He looked nothing like the man who'd left 7 years ago. Bald from chemo, thin, weak. His expensive suit hung off his frame. He rented a car and drove to Fifth Ward. Nothing had changed. Same broken streets, same struggling people, same poverty he'd escaped. James drove to Lyons Avenue. Mrs. Garcia's food stand was gone, replaced by a check-cashing place. But the corner store was still there, and the curb where they used to sit. James parked and got out of the car. His legs were shaky. The cancer had spread to his bones. Walking hurt. He walked toward the curb, and sitting there in the exact same spot where they used to dream was Robert. Robert looked older, tired. He wore construction clothes covered in dust, eating a gas station sandwich. James's heart clenched. He walked closer. Robert looked up. For a long moment, Robert just stared, like he was seeing a ghost. "James?" he whispered. "Hey, Rob." Robert stood up so fast his sandwich fell to the ground. What the hell? We buried you. We mourned you. His voice broke. I know. You know? You've been alive this whole time and you never... Robert couldn't finish, couldn't process. I need to tell you something. You better have a damn good explanation. I won the lottery. Robert went still. What? That night, January 2016, the $1.2 billion jackpot. I won it. Understanding dawned on Robert's face, then anger, then rage. You won our numbers? The group ticket? I bought my own ticket with the same numbers, and I won. So you faked your death? You let us mourn you? You let Mrs. Garcia? His voice broke. Mrs. Garcia had a heart attack at your funeral, James. The stress of losing you. She died thinking you drowned. James felt like he'd been stabbed. She's dead? Yeah, because of you. Because you're a selfish piece of... By now, people had noticed. Someone called David and Michael. They arrived within 10 minutes. The reunion was not what James had imagined. David punched him in the face. James fell to the ground, too weak from cancer to defend himself. 7 years, David screamed. 7 years! We thought you were dead! Michael pulled David back. He's not worth it. They all looked at James, really looked at him. What's wrong with you? Michael asked, his anger fading slightly. You look... Brain cancer, stage 4. I have 3 months, maybe less. The anger in their eyes flickered, but it didn't go away. So you came back because you're dying? Said Robert. You want forgiveness? You want us to feel sorry for you? I don't know what I want. I realized I'm dying alone. And you guys were the only real thing I ever had. And I destroyed it. Yeah, Michael said coldly. You did. Christopher pulled up on his motorcycle. When they told him what happened, Christopher just stared at James with dead eyes. My wife died 2 years ago, Christopher said quietly. James felt his heart stop. She couldn't get the surgery. We couldn't afford it, so she died. Christopher's voice was completely flat, empty. You could have saved her with the change you leave for tips, but you were too busy being dead. There was nothing James could say. No defense, no excuse. I'm sorry doesn't bring her back, Christopher said. He got on his motorcycle and drove away. The others just looked at James with disgust and pity. I'm donating it, James said desperately. All of it, the whole $2 billion. I'll give it to you guys, to charity, whatever you want. We don't want your blood money, Robert said. We wanted our brother, but he died 7 years ago. You're just some rich asshole wearing his face. They walked away, all of them, leaving James kneeling on the same curb where they used to dream together. Where 5 broke friends used to believe that when one of them won, they'd all win. James had won, and he'd lost everything that mattered. James died alone on December 23, 2023, in his Hollywood mansion, in his California king bed. The housekeeper found him 3 days later. His will left specific instructions. $50 million to each of his 4 friends, Robert, David, Michael, Christopher. The rest, nearly $2 billion, to various charities, cancer research, homeless shelters, children's hospitals. His friends all refused the money. Blood money, Robert called it. It sat in escrow for a year before being distributed to charity. James's funeral had 6 attendees: his lawyer, his accountant, his housekeeper, 3 reporters covering the story. No friends, no family, no one who loved him. Compare that to his fake funeral 7 years earlier. Over 100 people, standing room only, people crying genuine tears for a man they thought had drowned. The irony was cruel and perfect. 5 years later, a documentary was made about James Miller, the billionaire who died alone. They interviewed Robert, David, and Michael. Christopher still refused to talk about it. "You know what's sad?" Robert said in the documentary. "James got exactly what he wanted. He got rich. He got to live like a king. But he lost the only thing worth having, his brothers. And in the end, he died alone. That's the worst kind of death, not the cancer, the loneliness." The documentary showed footage of Fifth Ward, of the corner where they used to sit. Someone had painted a memorial for the brothers who stayed loyal and the one who forgot what loyalty meant. Years later, people still debate James's story. Was he a victim of poverty who made a terrible choice, or a monster who got exactly what he deserved? But everyone agrees on one thing: karma is real, and it always collects. James betrayed his brothers for $1.2 billion, and he paid for it with everything that actually mattered. He died with more money than he could ever spend, and less love than any person deserves. That's not a success story. That's a warning. So that's James's story. From broke repairman to billionaire to dying alone in a mansion nobody visited. Here's my question for you. Would you have split the money like you promised? Or would $1.2 billion be too much temptation? And here's what haunts me. James tried to make it right at the end. He tried to give away the money. He apologized. Should that count for something? Or are some betrayals unforgivable? If this story made you think about loyalty, about karma, about what money can and can't buy, hit that like button and subscribe to The Tales Teller. Drop a comment. Would you have forgiven James, or would you have walked away like his friends did? Because here's the truth. We all like to think we do the right thing, but when life-changing money is sitting in front of you, who knows what any of us would do? Your story could be next.